Hello to all. Welcome to Books and Us, the podcast about learning about new ideas and getting inspiration from books. I'm Ranjit Monga, and as you know, every week I take up books in the non-fiction category, from which we can get a wealth of knowledge and information. The interviews conducted on this podcast are also available on the news website www.globalbihari.com. So if you want to read about them, just go to the website and search under my name or the column, which is called Literary Speaking.
We need to treat animals the way that we would want to be treated. If we start doing that, then we will automatically start to address the climate change, the pandemics, and so on that are linked to our current treatment of animals and start reversing these damaging trends.
Welcome to another edition of the podcast Books and Us. Today we have with us a guest, Poorva Joshipura, a dynamic animal rights activist and author of the incredible book Survival at Stake: How Our Treatment of Animals is Key to Human Existence, published by Harper Collins. The book for me was an eye opening account of how various agencies all over the world treat animals, whether it is for testing at animal farms for producing meat, eggs, and milk, which are produced like in a factory, and also in the entertainment industry. It is really a riveting account about which we will talk today. So, Purva, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Ranjit, and thank you for that lovely introduction.
Just to give you a background about Purva, she is the Senior Vice President of International Affairs for People for the Ethical Treatment of Animals, which we all know as PETA, Foundation UK. She has worked in various capacities with PETA for the past 25 years, including the India chapter of the foundation. She is the former Chief Executive Officer of PETA India. She has also been part of the Animal Welfare Board of India. Purva's work has got her many awards for stopping cruelty to animals, which are used in the clothing, food industry, as well as for experimentation in labs and for entertainment and other purposes in countries around the world. Today, we are going to really learn from her how this is all connected to our existence and to the existence of the human race in future. And she has wonderfully connected the dots in the book. Purva is based out of Delhi, Mumbai, and UK. So, Purva, your book explains the cruelty shown to animals in different industries. Can you elaborate on that?
Yes, of course. So, you mentioned that I have worked in various capacities with PETA. And among those has been my being an investigator. So I've personally conducted investigations, for example, of how animals are transported or of slaughterhouses. I've been inside laboratories. I've also overseen other investigations that my colleagues have done, and on factory farms, and everything ranging from the use of bulls for spectacles like Jallikattu to animals in circuses and so on. So what I describe in the book is often what I have seen firsthand, or what we have captured in extensive video footage. So the kinds of examples, for animals used for food, for animals used for clothing, for these various industries and uses that you described, we do things like cage and confine animals by the thousands in conditions so cramped they can hardly move, especially in the food industry. We slit their throats or essentially shred them alive for leather or wool. And, we go into the forests and we hunt wildlife, or we farm them for fur, traditional medicine, meat. We capture and breed monkeys and other animals and poison them and harm them in other ways in laboratories. And we beat animals to force them to perform in circuses and so on. There's many more details about exactly how we do these things in the book. And a common response when I tell people that I help animals is for them to say, well, we should tackle human problems first. I believe animals are inherently worthy of respect. But with each question I answered, I was always reminded that many people do not realize what the cruelties I've just described have to do with the well-being of humans, and how their well-being is intertwined with ours. And that's the gap in understanding that Survival at Stake seeks to fill.
Mhm. And the most riveting for me, the account is of live animals and the markets, live animal markets, which you have described, where body parts and half dead animals and blood is flowing anywhere, everywhere. And many of the diseases you have mentioned, including COVID, the COVID virus has emerged from such situations.
Yes, that's absolutely right. So, COVID-19 is largely thought to have first infected humans through wildlife at a live animal market like the one you just described. And these types of wildlife markets exist in China. They also exist in India. They exist in parts of Africa and South America. It's not something that is only limited to China. But if I describe to you exactly how they operate, it then becomes no surprise that a disease like COVID-19 could have stemmed from there. So you have animals, wild animals of a huge variety of species, some of whom are caught from the wild, others raised on farms, and they're all put into trucks, crammed into trucks and brought together. By the time they arrive, many of them are broken, bloodied, wounded, diseased, sick. They're all put in cages on top of each other, and they're sold. They're sold for things like meat, fur, traditional medicine, skin, even as pets. And, keeping animals like this in their own waste, in their own blood, in their own bodily fluids, all mixing together, this provides an opportunity for species who may never naturally meet to come together. It provides for diseases to spread between animals, and also for new diseases to emerge when viruses mix. And so COVID-19 is thought to have stemmed from something like that, just like SARS did some years before. And it's not only wild animals, it's wild animals. Yes, that's how it is thought that COVID-19 infected us. But bird flu, swine flu, these types of things are thought to come from keeping chickens in such severely crowded, filthy conditions, or pigs. Bird flu and swine flu spreads and emerges easily when we keep animals in such ways. So COVID is one example. There are many other zoonotic diseases, that is, diseases from animals, that have been infecting us at a more and more rapid rate because of our increased meddling with animals, increased meddling with nature, and the intensified and really outright cruel ways in which we farm and handle these animals.
As you just said, that you have also seen firsthand how the treatment happens. What is the essentially wrong with the way they are handled, and how can that be set right?
To answer that question, especially when it comes to animals used for food, I have to go to the source of the issue. And the source of the issue is that on average, a meat eater today consumes double what a meat eater would have consumed 50 years ago, double the meat. And today, as a result, over 70% of farmed animals, chickens, pigs, cows, and so on, are factory farmed. That is some 64 billion land animals out of the over 92 billion that are used for food every year. And that's not even counting the up to trillions of fish. So on these farms, to meet this enormous demand for animal-derived foods, up to thousands of animals are confined to the smallest spaces, to the smallest cages, crates, or sheds in warehouses. They are denied absolutely everything that is natural and important to them. They are forced to sit in their own filth, and they're so crammed that they can hardly move. For instance, chickens on egg farms, they're kept all around the world in most countries in battery cages that are so small that they cannot even spread a wing. So to keep animals alive in such poor conditions, they are pumped full of antibiotics. So much so that more antibiotics are used in farmed animals than for ourselves. And this overuse of drugs is contributing to the development of very strong superbugs, and also contributing to these drugs, antibiotics, no longer working in humans when we need them. And it's called antibiotic resistance, this phenomenon, and it's one of the biggest threats to global health. The World Health Organization points out that about 700,000 people lose their lives already every year from drug-resistant diseases, and our overuse of antibiotics in the factory farming sector is one reason for that.
You have also talked about sea animals, which are handled very cruelly, and what we are doing to the seas.
Yes, and there's that saying that there's plenty of fish in the sea, but really there's not. And in my book, among the sea animals, I talk a lot about are whales, and I speak about them because they're important because they are inherently important, but also because they're important for the environment. And there's a lot of sympathy for whales. Most people that you speak to would agree that we shouldn't kill whales, and that we should save the whales and so on. But it's not deliberate hunting missions of whales that is the biggest killer of whales. The biggest killer of whales is considered bycatch. Now, bycatch, yes, bycatch is fish in marine life, or even birds, who are caught accidentally when fishermen are trying to target other species. So you could have a gigantic net, which the industry might be targeting certain species of fish, but they drag up all the other animals that happen to find themselves in that net. So bycatch is considered the biggest killer of whales, surpassing the number of whales killed on deliberate hunting missions. In fact, the International Whaling Commission says bycatch and entanglement in fishing gear is the single most direct threat to all cetacean populations and welfare. One figure showed that bycatch kills at least 300,000 small whales, dolphins, and porpoises a year. And this is, very important for us to recognize for the whales, but it's also very important for us to recognize for ourselves. So in my book, I call whales Greta Thunbergs with flippers because they are nature's climate activists. They when they die, they move carbon that has accumulated in their bodies over their lifetimes, and some whales live to even over 200 years down to the seafloor, where it can stay for hundreds of years. And so whales are so important to the environment that they even outdo trees in being carbon stores. So the International Monetary Fund says that one whale is worth thousands of trees. That's what they say. And they try to monetize what great work a whale does in protecting our planet. And they valued it at about $2 million US. That's just one whale. So a great whale on average absorbs about 30 tons of carbon dioxide when they die. A tree, in comparison, absorbs just over 21 kilograms of carbon dioxide in a year.
So you also say in the book that all this can change only when the world, the people, the human race changes its habits. Is that possible?
I 100% think it is possible. People are already changing their habits. More and more people are doing so for the animals themselves, even if they do not realize the link between, animal welfare and environmentalism and human welfare and so on. But the more people recognize the link, the more people are realizing that we really have no choice but to do something about it. I'll give you an example. Several years ago, the United Nations put out a report that said a move toward vegan eating is necessary. A global move toward vegan eating is necessary for us to fight the worst effects of climate change. And that's because about 1/5 of all human-caused greenhouse gas emissions come from the meat, egg, and dairy industry. The world's top 5 meat companies' emissions are estimated to be significantly larger than those of oil firms like Shell and BP, and the dairy industry's contribution to global human-induced emissions is higher than the share of aviation.
Is that because the amount of land which they bring under their animal farms is going on increasing, or is there another link to the greenhouse
So,
emissions?
one of the biggest links is the fact that ruminant animals, that is, cows, buffalo, sheep, goats, produce a lot of methane. And to meet the enormous demand for meat, eggs, and dairy, there are more animals who are killed every year than 8 times the human population that there is on this earth for just even 1 year. So when we're talking about such a massive number of animals, who wouldn't exist in these huge numbers naturally, there would be a balance. Producing methane, that is a major cause of it. And then also, like you said, enormous land use, enormous water use goes into producing these foods, because you need the land for the factory farms or the places where these animals are raised, but then you also need the land to be used for the crops that feed these animals. So about 1/3 of all global cropland goes to feeding these animals, not humans directly. About 45% of global surface area is now used for animal agriculture, that is meat, egg, and dairy production. How much, for a little bit of meat, a couple of eggs and some milk, we have to feed the animal for their lifetime, even though it's a shortened lifetime, but for their lifetime. We have to give that animal water for that time. So meat, egg, and dairy production is hugely inefficient as compared to if humans would simply eat those plants directly.
Like you give an example of corn, the example of the crop corn.
Absolutely. So most corn and most soy on the planet is fed to animals, almost all of it. What human beings eat is actually quite minuscule in comparison. And so what this also creates is a situation where globally, the one type of crop is being grown on land all around the world. And so the problems that are associated with that one crop exists in places around the world. So the use of pesticides or having an effect on the environment when you only grow one type of plant. These are all things that start affecting the whole world, because we're growing so much soy and corn only to feed these animals.
I also want to ask you that how did you personally get involved in this issue?
Yes. So I used to eat meat. I used to wear leather. I used to buy animal tested products. I would go to the circus and the zoo, and I would do all of these things without really much of a thought. At the same time, I loved animals, or at least I considered myself to. And I really didn't see the disconnect. And that's because so much of how we use animals is so normalized in society. You know, we wake up, we might use an animal tested toothpaste. We then might put on leather shoes. We might have a breakfast that has animals on our plate. We might then decide to go to the zoo. And so it really took someone challenging me for me to myself see the connection. And so a friend of mine, you know, when I was a teenager, we had gone to a mall food court and we were sitting together, and she got something vegetarian to eat and I got a chicken burger from McDonald's. And she asked me, "Are you really going to eat that?" And I said, "Well, yes. Why are you saying that?" And she said, "Well, because it's an animal." Anyway, I still ate the chicken burger that day, but it started me thinking. And then it started me on a journey of learning more about animals. And the more I learned, I thought, normal or not, I cannot contribute to what we do to animals for these products that we really do not need. As I was on this journey, I also had the opportunity to go to an animal sanctuary in the United States. And this animal sanctuary had animals rescued from the food industry. They had chickens, they had turkeys, they had pigs, cows, goats. And it was the first time I had ever seen these animals free to do as these animals want to do. And as a result, you know, when we first walked in, the first individual who came to greet us was Alice the turkey. She just, you know, came right up and she was so curious. You know, I had a bag on my shoulder that had some mirrors on it, and she wanted to look at that bag, and I knelt down and she was so curious looking at it. And, you know, I started petting her, and I did not know that turkeys purr like cats do when they are content.
Okay.
And so I was just fascinated by this. And then I looked around and I saw some of the chickens were starting to come up to us. Others were staying back. Others were taking dust baths. Some of them were sitting on their eggs. And I thought, my goodness, they are busy. They have different personalities.
Yeah, they're like
Some
children.
of them are shy.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly. Some of them are shy. Some of them are bold. All of them are curious. And, you know, so they have a lot going on. They have language. Chickens talk to their chicks while they're still in their eggs. You know, so there's so much for us to learn about them if we are willing to open our eyes. We're so used to these animals only seeing them in cages or crates or in ways that they're not able to express themselves. So we don't get to know them.
Okay, you have talked a lot about monkeys and gorillas, and because they are the ones who are used the most for lab experiments. So what happens to them?
Yes, so the first time I talk about monkeys and gorillas in the book is in relation actually to the fact that it is thought that hunting episodes, you know, are hunting monkeys, chimpanzees, gorillas, and so on, is how human beings first were infected with HIV from monkeys and chimpanzees. Or also linked to Ebola. So where outbreaks of Ebola have been found, often dead gorillas have been found. And primates are still, sadly, heavily used in laboratories. These animals are often stolen from their jungle homes, or they're bred. These are social animals. I mean, we are primates. You know, these are our cousins in the animal kingdom. And yet we take them into laboratories, we put them in cages, we infect them with disease-like conditions, or we inject them with chemicals or force them to inhale something. for experiments on either disease or chemicals or a variety of things. And just the environment of being in that cage and away from their families and away from their friends is so traumatic for these animals that they start going insane. Their immunity is impacted. And, that in and of itself starts impacting the outcome of the experiments. And more researchers and scientists are realizing this. So they are not only for the sake of animals, but for the sake of science too, starting to move away from the use of animals in the laboratory and toward more humane and human relevant modern approaches. The other thing is, as I mentioned, HIV and Ebola first infected human beings through primates. Well, keeping animals in laboratories in and of itself creates a risk for either existing disease or even disease we don't know about from primates infecting human beings.
You have also mentioned in your book that the animal cells have been used also successfully for testing of these drugs.
Yes, there's many different non-animal techniques which have been developed. The use of animals is quite an archaic form of research that has really not proven itself. In fact, it's quite the opposite, where scientists have found that there's an unreliability because animals' bodies are different from our own. Using them is not a good model for developing a human medicine or figuring out what is best for human beings. And it's for reasons like that, for instance, the Netherlands, they had announced an intention of stopping all animal use by 2025 in the laboratory. I think that was a little bit of an ambitious goal, but nevertheless, that's the direction that they've said that they want to go in. In September 2021, the European Parliament passed a resolution to, quote, accelerate the transition to innovation without the use of animals in research, regulatory testing, and education. And the US Environmental Protection Agency has committed that it will stop conducting or funding studies on mammals, at least by 2035. And that's because, like you just said, there's many developments. For instance, they include tissue on a chip models, that is silicon chips using human cells that mimic human organs and organ systems that are used for things like disease modeling and drug testing. There's also other things like a high throughput screening robot that can test more chemicals in one day that have been tested over decades using animals. There's various computer-based methods to study disease progression and drug metabolism and so on. And so with the advancement of science also comes the advancement of, better means to do better for ourselves, human medicine, and so on, through human relevant means. After all, we don't use veterinarians to treat sick human beings.
Do you see any evidence of that happening now? I mean, how soon can we see a change?
So we are already seeing non-animal testing becoming the norm in various areas of where animals were once used in the laboratory. Product testing is a big one. For instance, in India, through our efforts, cosmetic testing on animals is now banned. You cannot test cosmetics on animals. You cannot test ingredients of cosmetics on animals. Similarly, household product testing, you cannot test cleaners and detergents and so on animals. And we're also starting to see a shift away in other areas. For instance, lots of animals were used to train students, medical students, and so on. Now, a lot of that training is shifting to non-animal techniques. There is still a lot of use of animals in the laboratory, but little by little, PETA scientists, other people who are interested in this area are working to bring about a change.
Yeah, and also I think consumers are also quite aware of this cosmetics, especially being tested on animals, and they always check. A large part of the consumers do check whether they're buying a product which has been tested on animals or not.
That's right. And I would invite people to go to the PETA India website. That's petaindia.com. They will find a directory. It's called Beauty Without Bunnies. It's a global directory that is actually put together by our friends at PETA US. And we ask everyone when they're checking to always make sure that the company is listed with us as non-animal testing, because sometimes companies will write on their product that they don't test on animals, and what they really mean is the finished product, not the ingredients.
Not the
And
ingredients.
so, yeah, and so we are robust. Even though testing cosmetics on animals is banned in India, it still happens, say, for example, to meet requirements in other countries like China. And so the companies on our list, if they are listed as non-animal testing, it means that they do not test on animals anywhere in the world.
Is it possible to bring about a change in people's behavior?
Absolutely. I mean, if we're talking about some of the things are so easy. It is so easy to choose a leather bag made out of vegan leather or, non-animal leather as compared to a bag made out of animal leather, for instance. We can choose forms of entertainment that do not involve cruelty to animals or use of animals. We can look on PETA India's website to see which cosmetics are not tested on animals. And if we really look at our diets, especially in India, so much of what we eat is already vegan. We eat the dals and the sabzis and so on. And if it doesn't contain paneer or ghee or cream, it is usually vegan anyway. But nevertheless, for people who want that meaty taste, that meaty texture, or a dairy-like consistency, there's lots of companies nowadays making meat-like products, dairy-like products, egg-like products made from plants. And these are sold in India also.
So they have the same texture as meat or dairy products.
They do. And all of these vegan meats, vegan eggs, and so on, they're made from plants that are grown in abundance in India. They're made from things like jackfruit or mushroom or almonds or oats, moong dal. It's made out of things like this. And so the more the world starts becoming interested in these vegan food products, which they are, the better it is, honestly, for Indian farmers to take advantage of that interest.
And the more people turn vegan or move away from meat eating, less and less land will be made available to animal farms, and there would be less cruelty shown to animals, and more land is available for forestation and for growing plant-based food.
100%. So Oxford researchers have tried to put this into statistics, and they have found that a global switch to vegan eating could save 8.1 million human lives by 2050, reduce greenhouse gas emissions by 70%, and lead to healthcare related things up to, $1,000 billion US per year. It could also avoid climate-related damages of 1.5 billion US dollars. So we're talking about huge change simply by our making the individual choice to eat vegan.
To sum up, can you encapsulate how cruelty shown towards animals is detrimental to our existence, and what we can do at our level to contribute to it in a positive way?
Yes, so I, most of my book talks about what the issues are. It talks about climate change, pollution, epidemics, pandemics, antibiotic resistance, other public health risks, even how cruelty to animals increases violence in society. And the last chapter of my book talks about what we can do about it all. If I were to pick one piece of advice that really says it all, is that we need to treat animals the way that we would want to be treated. If we start doing that, then we will automatically start to address the climate change, the pandemics, and so on that are linked to our current treatment of animals and start reversing these damaging trends.
So, on that positive piece of advice from you, let me say thank you to you for being a part of this podcast.
Thank you. Thank you so much for inviting me.
So, would you like to share any contact details?
Sure. So people can contact me through PETA India. So they just need to go onto the PETA India website. We have a phone number there that they can contact our organization through. Also info@petaindia.org. If you write to there and you ask for me specifically, the email will get to me and we will certainly reply to you.
Okay, thank you for sharing your details, and thank you again for being part of Books and Us.
Thank you so much.
So that was an interview with author Poorva Joshipura about her book, Survival at Stake: How Our Treatment of Animals is Key to Human Existence, published by Harper Collins. Well, listeners, if you know about some interesting books in the non-fiction category or know authors you would like to put me in touch with, you can reach me at podcast@ramonproductions.org. That is RAMONPRODUCTIONS.org. And we can include them in the second season of our podcast, which is coming soon. Thank you for listening to this episode of Podcast Books and Us. Until next time, this is Ranjit Monga signing off. Goodbye and take care.